Welcome to Son of a Glitch. Join us as we explore some of the internet's craziest glitch stories. Story 1. So, the other day, I went to the local Walmart because I needed some Sudafed. My sinuses were clogged up like a toilet after a night of Taco Bell, and I was desperate for anything that might help me breathe again. As I walked through the sliding doors, that familiar blast of overconditioned air hit me, and I felt a sneeze coming on. One of those unstoppable ones where your whole face scrunches up, and you know you're about to spray the entire entryway. I spotted the greeter, a sweet older woman standing beside her cart of cleaning supplies, and noticed she had a roll of paper towels. So between sniffles, I asked if I could grab a bit, just in case the sneeze situation escalated. She smiled and tore me off a small wad. I folded it up neatly and stuck it in my left pocket, right behind my phone. For context, I was wearing my favorite red Adidas track jacket, the one with 2 white stripes down each arm and a big white Canada logo on the back. It's kind of my go-to for errands or lazy days. I actually have another one that's identical in design, but with yellow stripes and Spain on the back. I don't wear that one much. It feels weird since I have absolutely no connection to Spain. I'm not Spanish, don't speak the language, don't follow their sports. Nothing against the country, I just prefer my Canada one. Anyway, after pocketing the paper towel, I made my way to the pharmacy section, grabbed the Sudafed, paid, and headed out to the parking lot. When I got to my car, I reached into my left pocket, intending to blow my nose, and the paper towel was gone. Just my phone sitting there. I thought maybe it fell out when I pulled my wallet out at the register or something. No big deal, I figured. I tossed the Sudafed on the passenger seat and went home without thinking much more about it. Fast forward to this morning. I wake up, still a little congested, and go to get dressed. My Canada jacket was in the laundry, so I reluctantly grabbed the Spain one. Like I said, I rarely wear it unless I have to. As I zipped it up, something crinkled in the pocket. I reached in, and there it was. The same folded piece of paper towel from Walmart. The same one I asked the greeter for, the one I clearly remember putting in the pocket of my Canada jacket. For a second, I just stood there staring at it. I know what you're thinking. Maybe I mixed them up. But I swear I didn't. I remember the exact moment I pushed that paper towel behind my phone in the Canada jacket. I remember checking that pocket later, finding nothing, and shrugging it off. And I know I didn't wear the Spain one that day. I even remember hanging it back in my closet, untouched. The weird part is how sure I am. It's not one of those memory slips where you second-guess yourself later. I'm positive about it. The jacket, the pocket, even the texture of the paper towel. It doesn't make sense. The only explanation that fits is something I don't really want to consider, like the universe glitched, or some weird, minor reality swap happened between the two jackets. I know it sounds stupid. It's just a paper towel, but it's been bothering me all day. Because I know what I did, and I know what I didn't do. And yet somehow, that piece of paper towel ended up where it shouldn't be, sitting quietly in the pocket of a jacket I didn't even wear. I don't know what to think anymore. Maybe I should just stop shopping at Walmart. Story 2. I work the counter at a sleek little telecom shop off Syntagma. My job is to smile, point, compare plans, and talk people into believing that paying more means sleeping better. It's a ritual, paperwork spread out like tarot, pens lined in a row, the hum of the air con, the glass door sighing each time the street sneezes someone inside. The first time it happened, 2 lads wandered in still smelling like cigarettes and sea salt. Maybe they'd come up from Piraeus. One had that athletic, restless posture, like he wanted to bounce his knee but was holding it in. They were both flipping through the pricing list, the way everyone does when they're searching for the trap. The athletic one leaned to the other and muttered, soft enough to be private, Pi alpha nu kappa iota beta alpha epsilon. Expensive, eh? Without thinking, I heard myself say, nu alpha iota, alpha lambda lambda gamma iota alpha tau tau omicron iota alpha pi omicron iota tau iota tau alpha. Pi nu tau alpha pi lambda or nu epsilon iota kappa tau iota pi alpha rho alpha pi nu omega. Yes, but for this kind of quality, you always pay a little more. He froze, eyes round. Mu iota lambda epsilon lambda lambda 8 nu iota kappa. You speak Greek? I know, I said, blinking. I mean a few words. Friends. My smile felt like a mask that didn't fit. He made a face at his friend, caught somehow, and then they laughed in that embarrassed way people laugh when the floor gives a little. I looked over at my colleague, Maria, who was pretending not to listen, and she raised one eyebrow like, you good, file? I turned back to the plans, the world suddenly an inch to the left. Maybe I'd just guessed. Maybe the tone of his voice said it all, and I parroted the kind of sentence I'd said 1,000 times already. A trick of cadence, a trick of retail. That was my explanation as I stamped their forms and waved them into the hot glare outside. I told myself it was nothing and went on with my afternoon, which is how you survive 100 little weirdnesses in this city. Traffic evaporating, cats appearing out of nowhere, the Acropolis somehow always knowing where you are. 2 weeks later, on a Wednesday soft as stale bread, an older woman and her daughter came in. The daughter's English was patchy but determined. The mother had a scarf tied under her chin, and that purposeful look older women get when they have navigated a lifetime by reading rooms instead of maps. Mandarin rippled between them, quick and musical. The mother touched the brochure with a fingertip, and in Chinese she said, "I like the red one." I didn't think. "Yes," I answered. "Of all the colors, that's the best one for you." The daughter's face broke open into a grin. "Ni hui shua zhongwen? You can speak Mandarin?" "No," I said too fast. "No, I can't." My tongue stumbled over the can't as if it disagreed. The mother looked at me like I'd just revealed a card I wasn't supposed to have. The room hummed, fluorescent light stuttering a fraction, a tremble in the edge of things like the streetcar passing without touching the tracks. Maria coughed behind me, the polite cough of a colleague offering me a rope or a way out. I handed them the red model. They left happy. My face, for a second, went flat, like I had no expression to load. That evening I walked home down Irmu, and the city looked rendered, too crisp, too bright, like someone had turned the sharpness up on the world. Greek voices bounced off the marble, English tourists unspooled their syllables, and somewhere a bus wheezed a prayer. I passed a church, and the bells rang with exact, digital precision. I thought about the two moments and how my mouth had gotten there before my brain, and I wondered if whatever makes language happen had taken a shortcut I didn't know existed. After that, I started to notice the way people spoke before they spoke, the throat clearing, the jaw's micro-tilt, the eyes narrowing the way they do when someone's about to say, "But." I'd hear the end of a sentence breathing in the beginning of it. A woman would glance at a cheaper plan, and I'd feel the word however blooming in my chest. Sometimes, when I reached for a phrase, I could feel 3 versions of it lay themselves in my mouth like cards, Greek, English, something else. I would swallow the something else and say the safe, polished script I'd been trained to say. One afternoon a man from Thessaloniki joked in a textured northern drawl, "Mu alpha epsilon nu alpha iota nu alpha pi lambda rho sigma omega tau sigma omicron, nu alpha mu omicron upsilon delta sigma epsilon tau epsilon kappa alpha iota kappa alpha phi. If I'm paying this much, give me coffee too." I laughed and said, "Skeeto or Metrio? No sugar or medium." He lit up like we were cousins. Later, a French couple spoke to each other about roaming charges, and I felt a gentle nudge in my mind. "Ce n'est pas si mal," and I almost said it aloud. Where does understanding come from? Is it the shape of a hand over a page, the way the face tilts toward a price like bowing to an altar? Is it the rhythm more than the words, the air around words? I once heard a musician say that you don't listen to notes, you listen to the space between them. Maybe I was listening to the space. At night, I dreamed in static, brochures fluttering though the air was still, receipts printing themselves, numbers sliding into columns that aligned with the hush of the AC. I'd wake up with a word on my tongue that tasted like metal and couldn't be spelled. On the trolley, I watched lips moving and saw subtitles that weren't written anywhere. Sometimes I turned my head sharply to jar it loose, the way you pop your ears on an airplane. I worried I was sick. I Googled symptoms and read about seizures and auditory processing and stress. Stress, I could believe. It was tourist season. But stress doesn't make you reply to Mandarin you don't understand, or toss off idiomatic Greek you've only heard at souvlaki stands at 2 in the morning. Stress doesn't make the brochures ripple when no one's passed by. I started keeping a small notebook under the counter. When something like it happened, when I understood before understanding, I drew a tick and scribbled the moment. The ticks gathered like a flock. Maria asked me if I was noting down upsells. I said yes. She winked. "Malaka, get that commission." One slow afternoon, I tested the world. A man came in, Romanian passport, quiet eyes. He was reading the data packages, lips moving without sound. I stepped into the silence between his words and said softly, "Your wife wants the video calls to be clear." He looked up slowly and nodded, like I'd reached across a river he hadn't told me about. "Yes," he said. He bought the plan with excess we both pretended was sensible. Maybe this is what fluency is, not in language but in people. Maybe Athens taught me to read the world through its heat shimmer and impatience and the way voices weave at crosswalks. Maybe I'm imagining patterns because patterns are how you survive. Or, my heart stutters sometimes as the aircon clicks on. Maybe under the words there's a grid, and I've started to feel its hum. Maybe every hello is a door already half open. Maybe something is listening back. When I lock the shop at night, the glass door gives that breathy sigh, and syntagma unspools like a script I've read before. The city speaks in many mouths. I don't know any of them well. But lately when someone mutters, expensive, in any alphabet, some part of me answers from beneath language, calm as a cashier, certain as a stamp. Story 3. I called my mother as I stepped off the bus, shoulders sweaty from the plastic seat, the evening air warm and sweet with orange blossom and diesel. Mama, yakasi Lego, I said, and I could hear the living room at full volume behind her, my little brothers arguing about a foul, my father yelling at the screen, the cheap TV speakers making the commentators sound like ducks. Pots clattered in the kitchen. Vale, Carino, La Cena and 10 minutos, she said, and I could almost smell the sofrito through the phone. On our street, the usual chorus, clinking glasses from the bar on the corner, somebody's old Sevillanas on a radio, laughter drifting like cigarette smoke. It was the kind of noise that tucks you back into yourself. Home noises. The walk is 5 minutes, maybe 6 if the crosswalk light plays games. I took it slow, counting tiles like I used to when I was a kid. Uno, dos, tres, the cracked one's a quiet superstition. A family was spread across the bar's terrace, pushchair, half-melted ice cream, the father doing the universal dad lean over a table. Venga niño scientate, he scolded, then laughed with the waiter. The world was ordinary in that radiant, boring way it gets at 8:30 in early autumn, the sky going bruised blue over white balconies. Our building door sticks, you have to hip-check it, and then it gives with a sigh. I pushed it, climbed the stairs with their mosaic steps, each one remembering 1,000 shoes. Hola buenas, I called automatically, even though our neighbor's door was closed. At our landing, the smell of bleach and tomatoes softened into the warmth of our house. I pressed the latch, the door swung in, and I did what I always do. Hala ea. I sing-songed like an idiot, so the cats would come out and my brothers would heckle me. Nothing. I tried again louder. Hola ea. The word felt too big in my mouth, as if I'd said it in a church. The TV was on. Football, definitely. A replay slowed over green grass, the camera panning across a stadium that roared with people I couldn't hear. The sound bar lights were lit, a neat little row of blue, but there was no sound. The kitchen light glowed. A pot of something simmered and did not bubble. Steam rose, then hesitated, as if remembering how. Mama, I said, stepping into the living room. The sofa was empty except for the dent where my father always sits, the blanket thrown over the arm like a flag of surrender. The cats were there, Menta blinking slow on the windowsill, Sombra arranged in his favorite loaf on the rug, eyes half closed. They looked at me, then at the TV, then bored at me again. Animals always know, people say. Mine were made of lukewarm pudding and contempt. I moved through the rooms calling names. The lights were on in the bathroom, the mirror fogged faintly like someone had breathed a secret onto it. In my brother's room the game console menu spun in its silent loop. The curtains were open to the balcony, and I went out into the night. It was as if someone had lifted a dome over the block. The bar opposite stood illuminated, the sign buzzing, napkins fluttering on tables, but there were no people. No waiter, no family with their pushchair, no guy pretending not to glance at his phone while his date went to the bathroom. The terrace chairs, offended at being empty, kept still. Out on the street, no cars, no scooters. Not even a dog dragging its human toward a lamp post of particular significance. Cicadas stitched a thin thread of sound, and behind that, a thicker silence pressed at my eardrums. The air itself felt padded, like the inside of a jewelry box. Que susto, I whispered, and my voice came back to me a beat too late. The delay made my skin pebble. Inside, I dropped my backpack in my room out of habit. The zipper sounded like a zipper from another room. I stood in the doorway feeling small in the wrong way, like a child in an empty cathedral. I wanted to call my mother again, but the idea of hearing the phone ring in an apartment without people felt like asking a question I didn't want answered. I don't know how long I wandered, seconds, minutes. Time in a vacuum is a rubber band. I opened the fridge to prove that fridges still hum. It hummed. The light inside was normal, banal. The yogurt was still obnoxiously peach. I closed it and leaned my head against the door and laughed, a single bark that sounded rude in the hush. Then the smallest thing, a puff of breath on my cheek. Yes, Dasaki? My mother said from my bedroom doorway, surprised. She wore her cooking apron, and there was a tea towel wrapped around her wrist like a lazy bracelet. No tioy entrar. Something unclenched. The air repopulate with tiny sounds. The spoon in the pot, the TV commentary snapping alive mid-sentence, the slap of a neighbor's sandals on tile, someone downstairs yelling, "Galazzo," through the open window. I could hear the bar again. Plates clacking, someone cursing cheerfully, a child whining for another Fanta. My brother's chorus rose from the sofa like a storm returning to the coast. The cats looked offended that the world had resumed without consulting them. "What do you mean you didn't hear me?" I asked. My voice trembled just enough for her to tilt her head. I said hello. Twice. "You no estabais." She frowned. "Como que no estabamos?" "We were here." Your father didn't move from the sofa. I walked to the living room, and there they were, sunk into their usual crater, the blanket now over both knees. My father scowling at a referee whose mother he was accusing of several improbable occupations. "Buenas," he said without looking, a syllable as routine as breathing. "I came in and no one was here," I said, and my mother and I looked at each other in the doorway. We both smiled, the way you do when a shared word refuses to settle on a definition. "Pews no te oimos," she said finally, and changed the subject. "Pon la mesa." Later, while I laid forks and folded napkins into messy triangles, I opened the balcony doors again. The bar was back to itself. The family had returned to their pushchair. Someone was singing badly to a song everyone knows. The night tasted of oranges and fried fish, and the relief of noise. I tried to remember the exact texture of the silence, the way the world had held its breath. It slipped away, the way dreams do when you reach for them. My father shouted, "Fuera de juego," and my brothers roared in disagreement. Meta jumped onto the table, and my mother scolded her half-heartedly. Water hissed against hot pan. I put the last plate down and wiped my damp hands on my shorts. I have no clever theory. Maybe it was a migraine that never bloomed, a panic attack in reverse. Maybe I walked into a pocket of air where sound took the long way around. Or maybe, and I don't say this to anyone because it sounds ridiculous, maybe the world blinked, closed its eyes for one lazy second and opened them again, and I happened to notice. In Andalusia we say no pasa nada when things go wrong, a charm against drama. Nothing happens. It's fine. Nothing happened. It's fine. But sometimes late, when the street dims and the bar's shutters rattle down, and all the usual noises retire to their little charging docks, I stand on the balcony and listen for the seam in the night. Just to see if I can hear it again, the moment when everything that should sound like life forgets itself, and the world becomes a room where I am the only person breathing. Story 4. We'd had another stupid argument, the kind with sharp corners you only see after you bump into them. I grabbed my keys, kissed my teeth, and told him, "Me just need breeze scene?" He didn't try to stop me. That's our rule. When my head starts sparking, I go walk until the fuse burns out. Borderline makes me loud inside. Walking makes the noise line up. September in Scarborough is that soft in-between. Air warm on the skin, breath already cooler at the edges. The subdivision grid felt safe. Semis with cracked driveways, kids chalking basketball keys on the sidewalk, porch lights already yawning on. Straight road, straight back, I told myself. Keep it simple. I passed the bungalow with the red door, the townhome with the plastic geese, the old maple that drops those annoying helicopters like confetti. Landmarks, breadcrumbs. I was fine. I walked past a corner I'd never noticed before, where a squat plaza sat, nail salon, vape shop, takeout jerk that never tastes like home. Then, like the city took a breath and exhaled in a different key, the street changed. The houses grew one size, then two. Brick became glass, and the glass had that rich shimmer like someone had polished the air. Lawns widened into squares that didn't belong to people so much as to landscapers. Driveways curved. The first wreaths and string lights were out, too early, the way people here rush winter with decorations that shake glitter into your eyes. I laughed. Toronto people in Christmas, eh? I said to nobody. My voice sounded absorbed, like the night was a thick curtain. A jogger went by, neon shoes whispering over the asphalt. He didn't glance at me. In one front window, a woman folded laundry, slow and calm, as if she were folding the same white shirt over and over. I didn't know this street, but it pretended it had always been here. The temperature dipped half a degree in that precise way expensive neighborhoods manage. Somewhere distant, the low hum of a boat motor, and I thought, that's wrong. 2 more blocks and the street opened like a hand, and there it was, a lake. Not a pond, not a stormwater thing. A stretch of charcoal water, laid out with the casual arrogance of a condo brochure. The houses leaned toward it, glass catching the mauve sky. I could smell faint algae and that heavy clean smell water has at night. I stopped where the sidewalk met a curve of pale stone. My reflection came up, a smudge. "No way," I whispered, and my breath made a small cloud I shouldn't have seen in September. I kept walking. The streets fanned wider, as if for a parade of cars that didn't want to touch each other. I turned onto a block where all the streetlights were dead except one. It stood alone, buzzing like a fly trapped in a jar, light pooling under it like a dropped coin. My skin prickled. Time fi GH home now, I told myself and picked up my pace. Footsteps behind me. I turned. A kid stood under the single light, preteen maybe, wearing a hoodie too large, face tucked down like he was reading the ground. He wasn't looking at me, or maybe he was, and the shadow made it hard to tell. He lifted his hand faintly, the way you wave at a neighbor you don't know but see often. I didn't wave back. I wanted to ask him, "You know where Kingston Road is? Birchmount? Anything?" But my tongue stayed heavy, and when I blinked he seemed a half-step farther away, like distance had miscounted. I kept walking. The next block and the next. The lake fell away to my left, or maybe I curved, or maybe there was no left and right anymore, just forward like a thread you keep finding under your fingernail. I tried to map myself. Straight, straight, left, straight. Straight road, straight back. I repeated, but the words didn't stick. Somewhere a wind chime tinkled, then stopped mid-note and held its breath. The last clear thing I remember is passing a hedge trimmed into a perfect green wall and thinking, people must live behind that, people with voices and burnt toast and arguments. Then the streetlights hiccuped and music, loud, cheerful, ragged around the edges. A bachata spilled across a front yard I knew. The family that always danced outside on weekends was out early, two little girls skipping while their grandmother clapped offbeat. The lamppost on their corner blinked, then steadied. The air warmed. I was standing in front of their house, like the city had slid me to where I belonged on a mousepad. I walked down the short side street to our semi-detached, heart going like it wanted to be somewhere before I did. The stale basement smell in the stairwell wrapped me up. I went down into our place, my hands shaking only a little. He was on the couch, controller balanced on his knee. He looked up, saw my face, and put it aside. "You good? You ever see a lake round here?" I blurted. He laughed. "What kind of trick question is that? Lake Ontario is west. We're nowhere near." He paused. "Babe, you were gone like 30 minutes. You walked to the lake and back?" "Me swear I see it," I said. "Big houses, glass everywhere, Christmas lights. A grocery store on a corner, like nice one, not our grimy shop. Jogger. A kid." He leaned back. "Been here my whole life. No mansions. No lakes. No grocery on a corner like that. I can drive you around if you want." We did, 2 days later, on a clear afternoon when arguments felt far away. We took the same route, straight as a ruler. We found dead ends, cul-de-sacs, a parquet with a splash pad turned off for the season. No plaza. No wreaths. No lake, unless you counted the puddle under a leaky hydrant. We laughed, and it sounded like Jinx's keys. "You were vex and you walked far," he said gently. "Everything looked big when you vex." I opened Google Maps in bed that night. I traced where I thought I'd gone. Gray lines shape-shifted under my finger. Satellite view showed roofs the color of old coins. No water. I zoomed and zoomed until the pixels looked like static. Maybe me just reached someplace me mind needed. I told the ceiling. Story 5. You don't realize how much of your routine is about little kindnesses until one of them gets weird. Mine is the weekly text at 3:42 p.m., like clockwork. Arrival day. Your Scoopmate tech is on site now. It pings while I'm making tea, or scrolling rentals I'll never afford, or watching the rainbow lorikeets bully each other in the gum tree. It's a silly suburban luxury, a bloke who comes round and demines the backyard so my two idiots, Banjo and Vegemite, can thunder about without me stepping in a landmine on the way to the Hills hoist. The first strange week was hot, even for Melbourne. Heat sat over the street, like a dunna someone refused to shake out. The kookaburras laughed early, then gave up. I left the side gate unlatched, water out, bin lid open. Banjo panted on the cool tiles by the back door, a big dumb smile that said no thoughts, only frisbee. 3:42 p.m., right on time arrival. Banjo barely flicked an ear. The motion sensor light by the gate didn't kick. I kept an eye on the feed from the shed camera, the one that points down the side of the house, nothing. No high-vis shirt, no cap, no shadow. The back door sensor, which dings like a servo bell when anyone passes within a meter, stayed sulky and silent. I stood by the kitchen window, squinting through the fly screen like an old sticky beak. The jacaranda tossed a few purple confetti bits across the grass. A plastic bag drifted on the neighbor's fence like a ghost that gave up mid-haunt. My phone vibrated again. Job complete. All tidy. Have a ripper, Arvo. Righto, I thought. I went out. The gate clicked under my hand, still latched the way I'd left it. The yard was crisp, clean, surgical. The little spiral cones of shame were gone, bagged, and the tidy yellow Scoopmate sacks sat in my green-lidded bin under an empty carton of iced coffee like they'd been there since bin night. Banjo galloped out to confirm and, finding no evidence of his work, skidded in offended circles. Fair dinkum, I told the gum tree, because who else was going to listen? I checked everything, CCTV, the doorbell camera, the shed cam. Rewound, scrubbed, squinted. I saw my reflection in the sliding door more often than I saw another person. Nothing but the shimmer of heat, the flash of a wattlebird, the breathless stillness of 342 turning into 358. I rang customer service, the way you do when you both want an answer and don't want to sound like a loon. Hey, sorry, weird question, I said. The tech came today? The woman on the line had that smooth smile voice you get trained into. Yep. Checked in at the gate, geofence pinged, did a 20-minute session, checked out, left 2 kilos, good job, that one. Right. Thing is, my cameras didn't catch him. Sometimes they go around the blind side of the house. There is no blind side, I said, laughing too hard. It's a fibro box with ideas above its station. She chuckled politely. As long as the yard's clean, yeah? We hung up. I stood in the backyard and listened to a magpie gargle a threat somewhere off, and tried to feel normal. I took a photo of the bin with the bags, because that's the kind of woman I've become, proof hoarder, evidence goblin. I measured the distance from the gate to the first patch he'd have lifted. I checked the dirt for footprints, and found only Banjo's clown stamps and Vegemite's delicate little catty paws like punctuation marks after a swear. That night I told my sister, and she asked if I'd had a nap. Maybe you slept through it? At 3:42 on a Wednesday I am a live feed, I said. Also the motion sensor would have tripped. You got an invisible trot eye then. Lucky you. She cackled like a kookaburra with a podcast. A week later, I booked again because I'm either stubborn or greedy for answers. The day was bright and dozy, the sort where laundry dries before you finish pegging it. I left the gate the same, water the same, bin the same. The text came at 3:42 p.m., and this time the motion sensor bonged and Banjo went ballistic, and there he was. A man in a green polo, sturdy forearms, a bucket swinging. He waved through the window with the practiced friendliness of someone who waves for a living. "Day," he called, and his voice had that cheerful trot-eye volume that makes neighbors in a 3-house radius know your business. "Day." I called back, because we are all in the pantomime. I watched him work because that's not creepy at all. The careful grid he walked, the way he checked along the fence line, the little nod he gave each successful scoop like a fisherman grateful to the river. The shed camera loved him. The doorbell camera caught his entry. The back sensor pinged and pinged. He left me the 2 neat yellow bags and a good-natured joke about Banjo's heroic output. I laughed, too loud, relieved like I'd been forgiven for something. As he left, I said, "You forgot your invisibility cloak last week, eh?" He grinned. If only. Then he was gone, the gate clacking as if to say, "Behold closure." It was one of those winter afternoons that never quite commits to dark or light. Minnesota gray, snow light seeping through the kitchen window like skim milk. I had the big pot out, onions sweating in butter, the kind of smell that forgives everything. The dog, Lola, lay full length at my feet, chin on my sock, the embodiment of patient hope. Our house is sensible and square, 1970s practical. Foyer, short hall, sticky old basement door on the right, and then the kitchen opening to a wide doorway into the living room. If you stand at the island, you can see almost all of the living room except the corner where the couch sits, tucked behind the partial wall. That corner is a blind spot. Cozy when you're on the couch, irritating when you're nosy. My husband, Jake, had holed up in the basement since lunch. He calls it a workshop, which is generous for a space that mostly contains a workbench, a radio that only gets polka reliably, and a lot of coffee mugs that never come back upstairs. The basement door sticks so badly you can tell time by it. Opening is a groan, closing is a thunk you feel in your fillings. I was chopping carrots, telling myself not to look at the clock, when the basement door did its whole opera, Gruen, then a little pop at the hinge, then the goodbye thunk. I looked up in that automatic marital way and saw Jake coming in, head down, shoulders dusted with sawdust like early snow. He crossed the kitchen, not looking at me, the way he gets when a project is still in his teeth. He went past me into the living room and vanished into the couch corner. Lola's ears pricked. She rose in that fluid, cat-like way big dogs do, and followed him, nails ticking on tile, tail doing her polite metronome. I kept stirring. "You won't believe what Lori did at work," I said, loud enough to cross rooms. "She scheduled 2 bake sales on the same Saturday. 2. As if we're a Scandinavian church with 50 grandmas." Silence. Typical. I talked anyway because talking while cooking is a comfort, like steam for the brain. And the new printer's possessed. It keeps translating everything into French. I printed a timesheet, and it called me madam. From the living room, nothing. But the dog was there, so he was there. The onions shifted from sweet to the edge of bitter, so I turned the heat down and splashed in stock. From the hall, the basement door sang again. It startled me, honest to goodness spiked my heart. The sound wasn't ambiguous. Someone had just come up from the basement. Again. "Jake!" I called, wooden spoon in the air like I could parry a ghost with it. A half-second later, he appeared, not from the living room, but from the hallway, turning into the kitchen with his brow already crinkling at my tone. "What's up?" he said. I stared at him, and then at the living room doorway and back at him. He was clean, no sawdust, and he had his phone in his hand like he'd just put it down on the hall table. "Did you just come upstairs a minute ago and go sit on the couch?" He blinked. "No." The question mark in his voice was small but real. "But I heard," I started. We both glanced toward the living room like a punchline might climb back out. "I heard the door," I said softer. "I saw you walk through the kitchen." He looked into the living room. From the couch corner, Lola lumbered onto the cushions with a dog grunt and settled with her head exactly where his lap would be if he were there. She looked at us and thumped her tail once, bewildered by our lack of couch commitment. We stood in the kitchen doorway like we were about to enter a chapel. The living room was just the living room. The knit blanket slouched over the arm. The wood stove ticked as metal does when it thinks about cooling. A snowplow moaned 2 blocks over, lonely as a foghorn. "No husband." "Did you hear the door?" I asked. He scratched his jaw. "I heard you call my name." "Before that?" "Nope." He said it gently, like he didn't want to jostle whatever I was holding. I walked to the basement door and pulled it open to prove something to myself. It fought me like always, then gave with that hinge pop that is our house's only swear word. I let it swing mostly shut. The thunk was as solid as a handshake. The sound I'd heard wasn't my imagination. It was this sound. The exact one. Back in the kitchen, the soup breathed quietly. The calm that came over me was the strangest part, a soft Midwestern, well then. Not terror, exactly. Just a sense that the world had hiccuped and decided it wasn't worth fussing over. My heart slowed its rapid impression. I set the spoon down on a plate and wiped my hands on my jeans. "Okay," I said. "That was weird." Jake leaned on the island. "Tell me again," he said. So I did, and he listened like he does when the weather radio talks tornadoes. Attention and acceptance, a tiny squint toward the practical. "Maybe the sound was the vents," he offered. "Or you saw me in the window, reflection-wise." Lola sighed from the couch, the enormous, theatrical sigh of a creature who has patience for our species but not respect. She hadn't barked at a stranger. She hadn't even done her perplexed head tilt. If something had impersonated Jake, she'd made her peace with it. While we ate, I told him what my grandma used to say about fetches, spirit doubles that come to the living as an omen. He rolled his eyes fondly. "If my ghost wants soup before me, it can darn well help chop." Snow drifted down in polite confetti against the window. The soup was good in that uncomplicated way soup is when you've almost burned the onions and brought them back. We avoided the living room corner like it might be contagious. Later, when dishes were stacked and the house did its nighttime settling, baseboards cracking, the refrigerator performing its haunted house one-man show, I stood at the kitchen window with my palms on the cool counter and looked at our reflection layered over the glass. Us in the dark, and the faint suggestion of my face twice if I moved just enough. I want to tell you I figured it out, that there was a mirror angle or a draft or that my eyes betrayed me. But all I have is that minute of duplicate husband, one who walked through butter and onion air without looking at me and sat where he always sits, and the real one who answered my name from the hall. In the morning, I went down to the basement. It smelled like cold concrete and sawdust and men's shampoo in bottles that never end. On the workbench lay the project that had kept him. 2 maple boards clamped together. Glue seemed clean as a horizon. You could stand there and feel the house above and the pipes and footsteps, the faint, distant life of it. I closed the door on my way back up. It sang its usual song. That night I put my ear to Lola's side and listened to the steady drum of her heart. If he splits in 2 again, I told her, you come get me. She blinked slow, agreeing the way dogs do, with faith in the broad strokes. The couch corner was just a couch corner again, full of blanket and dog and the shape our life has worn into it. And if the world hiccups once more, I'll ladle soup into 2 bowls and set one aside, just in case the duplicate is hungry too.